Welcome to Business Not 101, hosted by me, Olivier Bousset. A podcast that introduces and explores the uncommon side of business. Everything from the aha moment to the business plan written on the napkin, to the roadblocks and problems encountered along the way, to the launch. In today's Founders Interview series, I am joined by Erin Willett, leadership and cultural strategist and founder of the Tap In team, an agency that helps leaders and their teams build foundations for growth. Where we talk about the aha moment, creating awareness and space for emotional intelligence at work, to building her community, marketing, and a whole lot more. Hi, Erin. Thanks for joining us on Business Not 101.
Thank you, Oliver. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. So let's get this going. As we were just talking before, let's flow into it. Give us our 60-second business pitch.
All right. Well, my name is Erin Willett. I am an artist, a lover of individuality, a rebel with a very heartfelt cause. Professionally, I'm a leadership and culture strategist. And what that means is that I help leaders to connect with themselves so they can better connect with the individuals that are going to help their companies to thrive. Specifically, what that means is that I work with decision makers and organizations to become more self-aware, to become aware of vision, of values, of opinions, of beliefs, and then to use that self-awareness to connect with team in their culture building, to connect with partners, to connect with market, and to build out strategies for connection.
Amazing. I noticed something on your bio that you sent me. I really like this. It was like you put yourself as a hippie and a change advocate. What do you mean by that?
The hippie part is, well, I'm very driven by love. And, the hippie part of my bio definitely came from the early part of my career. I was doing not necessarily leadership and culture strategist. I was involved in brand building, identity development. I was working with a lot of startups, and I was working mostly in the startup ecosystem, attempting to convince people that identity was important, that culture was important, that brand was important. And I got the same pushback over and over and over again. People called me granola. People said I was too soft. People said it was, kind of emotional and intangible. And I just wanted to claim it. And so around 2016, 2017, I started owning the title of hippie because I was like, I believe in the power of connection. I believe in love. I believe that things can be better. I believe that business can be personal. I believe it should be personal. And so I started really owning the title. And it was very liberating for me to call myself a hippie. And it just clearly stated to people who they were getting involved with. I think it was an invitation for people to kind of know, just to show up as they were and to know who was in front of them. So hippie was important for me and has been important for some time. And honestly, using the title hippie has opened so many doors, really beautiful doors.
Well, I'm really surprised people actually took the emotional intelligence part as though it was a weakness. I think that's a really strange thing. I find
the times have changed.
Yeah.
In the last 3-4 years, and especially in the last 2 years, there's been a big movement towards recognizing the importance of developing emotional intelligence in leadership. And, all the skills I was talking about, the open-hearted connections and the purposeful decision-making and the leading with love. Now people recognize that it's fundamental to building sustainable, long-term, successful companies. But man, it took a while before people got it. I really was in a very product-focused, feature-heavy, tech, rational, logical, analytical sort of space with clients for a long time. And so I was the outsider.
Yeah. I think that's a big mistake a lot of people do is they sort of get into this world where they just focus so much on just product or technology and they don't look at the greater picture. And I think you're 100% right. If you're not friends with your business partners or your customers or your suppliers, it's a difficult situation. I couldn't see being in a business where I can't be myself.
Right. It connects with the change advocate piece, which is also part of my bio. I realized in 2018 that what I was doing with culture building and leadership development was actually supporting leaders and organizations through change and supporting them to get to a place where they were more comfortable being agile, being creative in the face of change, and just leaning into transformation, leaning into growth. And what I realized, and what I deeply believe, and fundamental to the way that I approach my business, is the notion that you can't lean into change unless you start from that place of connection, unless you start from that place of understanding who you are as a leader, what you're trying to do here, what is your purpose, and focus on the connections that you're building with the people around you. Only then will you have a foundation off of which you can actually grow sustainably.
Very nice. Very true. Very true. That's
Thank you.
brilliant. Okay. So now, from that point, what do you think was your biggest roadblock going from where you were to where you are today in terms of your business?
There have been so many. There have been so many roadblocks. I think my journey of becoming professionally has involved several phases of evolution, several phases of hitting walls and then pivoting. And it's been an ongoing sort of, you know, I have never felt like it was smooth sailing. I still don't feel like it's smooth sailing, quite honestly. I'm always kind of learning something new. I think the first roadblock for me was when I first started freelancing in 2012. I was, as I said, working with a lot of startups in the startup ecosystem in Montreal, and I was doing visual identity building and communication strategies. And I was doing this work from a very, like I was saying, heartfelt place. Like, I need to know who you are and what makes you different in order to support you in building a strong visual identity and building strong communication strategies. And my approach for wanting to dig into identity and wanting to really get to know my clients, it just didn't work with that group. For between 2012 and 2015, I spent a lot of time trying to convince people who I knew needed this support that they needed me, but they weren't ready to know, they weren't there yet. They didn't, this audience did not recognize the importance of identity and culture and strategy yet. So my first roadblock was it took me a long time to learn the lesson. It took me 3 years, but I was trying to sell to people that didn't want me. And yeah, I felt like I needed to spend time convincing people.
And so from that point of saying, okay, you know what, people are not, I'm not connecting with my customers. Did you feel like it was a pain point because of where you're coming from, in the sense of you're looking at it more as a soft skill level versus where they were looking at it as a technically hard skill? Or was it because of the management, or where did you feel that there was really sort of like an issue that you couldn't sort of pass through with those people in that particular group of people?
I think there were two. There were a lot of different factors actually that weren't working out at that point. I mean, the way that we learn how to, the way that we learn what it looks like, in air quotes, to build businesses is not very soft skills focused, or at the time it was not soft skills focused. It was focused on features, it was focused on product development, it was focused on investor relationships. And I felt that it was very important to also have an element in there that was brand and identity and communications focused. But the industry, like the business building mindset, just wasn't there. So I think one of the big blockages was that the mindset of how you build business was not lined up with my personal mindset.
So
That sounds kind of vague, but
yeah, no, I get what you're saying. So the way that you envision your business and business structure was not the same as what they were visioning.
no,
And
and
that,
it wasn't the same as what they were being taught.
yeah.
In the ecosystem, they weren't being taught you need to invest in brand development. The other challenge there was that in order to really intelligently and intentionally build a strong brand, you need to get reflective, and you need to get patient, and you need to be contemplative. So that takes some time. Good
Yeah.
strategy work takes time. And that client group, that market is not a let's take some time to do this sort of group. They're very, very quick moving. Let's make some decisions. Let's sell some products. Let's like grow this as quickly as possible. That's sort of the headspace that they were in. So my approach of going more slow and more reflective just wasn't lined up.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I find the system here is often, certainly around the startup, they sort of took the Y Combinator outlook. Now I've done that Y Combinator school, startup school, and
Cool.
yeah, it was kind of cool. It was fun. And what I found is that so many people here sort of take the parts that they feel is important and they run with it, except they forget the rest of it. A lot of them sort of like rush forward and they hit the same walls. And I think that's a little bit of an issue, generally speaking, about the Montreal, I keep saying ecosystem. And I think that's really a fault with our current system, and there needs to be a change. On top of that, when you felt, okay, I'm hitting this wall, how did you bypass it? Did you just change all customers? Did you change your market segment group, or did you go off and say, let me approach them from a different angle?
For a while, I thought I need to change my approach and give them more digestible offers, smaller engagements that cost less money, still get them to a place of value, but make it so that they actually feel that they can invest the couple of thousands of dollars into brand building. And I learned very quickly that trying to shrink my approach down into something that was more digestible just to make it affordable was just not viable. I mean, I still gave as much time as if the offer was, much more extensive and complete. So I was working myself way too hard, and ultimately these clients weren't getting the big picture value that I was hoping to bring to them. So I tried for some time to alter my approach. Ultimately what I ended up doing was just, at one point, like, after hitting my head up against that wall so often and trying to convince that group for so long that they needed me, I just was like, fuck it. Like, I'm not going to spend time with a group that doesn't want me. Who actually wants culture work? Who wants brand work? Who wants leadership work? And then I really started thinking about HR. I really started thinking about, people, leaders, directors of people, directors of culture. And that shift was a very important one for me because, first of all, it allowed me to start engaging a client group that had more tiers of leadership, more hierarchy. Larger organization means more complex relationships and also more money to spend with an outside consultant. So it meant that they had more budget, they had more need. And also for me, from a personal standpoint, I didn't have to deal with people who didn't want me around, like I could actually deal with people who wanted my services and wanted to hear from me. So that was a relief when I started moving in that direction.
Very interesting. So, so here's a good question. Now you've switched it, you pivoted away from the startup scene and gone more with the HR scene. And how did you do that? And did you spend a lot of marketing? Did you research it, or was it 100% organic and you just started to ping your own contacts? How did you go about doing that?
So there were some pieces that were more organic. Like, I actually started using different language that would resonate more with the group. Like, I started calling what I was doing culture. I knew that it was culture, but I was also calling it brand. Like, in my perspective, your culture is a direct reflection of your ability to connect, and that will directly impact your external brand. So brand and culture were the same for me. But I started just calling it culture, which opened up all kinds of different doors. That piece was more organic. I also was encouraged by a group of learning experience designers that I had brought on to help me to build out some workshops that I could offer. I was encouraged by them to name and articulate my methodology, which I think is a really, is a very important part of me gaining credibility and building a foundation for myself as a consultant that I felt that I could trust and rely on. So I articulated my methodology, named my approach, and was able to understand what the steps were that I was taking to support companies in building stronger brands and building stronger cultures. So that was a very important part of pivoting, of pivoting in that direction, was to name the methodology. And then the third piece was, once I named my methodology, I felt a lot more confident talking about how I did what I did, how I brought structure to more intangible soft skills, in air quotes, sort of work. And once I started feeling comfortable talking about it, then I actually was like, I'm going to start putting it out there. So I would record myself, I'd share all kinds of stuff. Any speaking engagement that I got the opportunity to take, I took it. And then that, honestly, like, it ballooned. It kind of like one speaking engagement led to the next, led to the next, led to the next. And I just made sure that I was investing a lot of energy in telling people, I'll speak at that thing. Let's collaborate on that. Let's do an event. Let's meet at this thing and we'll talk about, I was very focused on speaking engagements and getting what I knew out there.
Interesting. Yeah. So you did a lot of organic. You didn't go off and say, okay, I'm going to create a Google AdWord campaign, for example. You really
No.
went out and you said, okay, let me find my customers individually. So you went and targeted your 1,000 first fans, if you want.
Yeah, I use my network big time. I started becoming much more vocal about my asks and much more vocal about who I wanted to work with. At the end of 2017, early 2018, I started being really explicit about the sorts of teams I wanted to be supporting, the sorts of leaders I wanted to be supporting. And whether I was talking to people one-on-one or I was sharing a video or I was talking at an event, I made it clear what kind of support I was hoping to get from them. I'm looking to work with this and this sort of person, and let's start a conversation. And if you know anybody that would whatever, put them in touch with me. Those were the sorts of asks that I was doing. That was very helpful. But ad spend, I'm trying to think if I've any. Yeah, I've put a little money into some ads, but honestly, I've worked my network, and I've really
Yeah.
invested in building up a really, really strong community.
So I see you a lot on LinkedIn, and I assume that LinkedIn is probably one of your strongest social media.
LinkedIn is amazing.
Yeah.
LinkedIn is amazing. I mean, and LinkedIn is so it's primed for authentic conversation and communication. You show a little bit of vulnerability on LinkedIn. And I'm not talking about like exposing your secrets or like crying in video. I'm talking about like just being yourself, talking about what you're actually going through, being vocal about what's up in your life or in your business. The response is always amazing. So any time that I've spent on LinkedIn has felt like time really well spent. And I did one really, really big intentional push on LinkedIn at the beginning of 2018. I had just invested in my visual brand and hired a video team to record certain segments of me talking. So I had a lot of content to use. And I told myself I was going to really be intentional about how I engage people on LinkedIn. I gave myself 12 weeks. I was like, I'm going to post 8 times a week. I'm going to do 1 article a week, 1 video a week. I'm going to do 1 inspirational quote. Like I had everything laid out. That 12 weeks was instrumental in a lot of the speaking engagements that I got, and really, really grew my network on LinkedIn in a really authentic way.
Nice. Yeah. And I think that's how we connected. I saw a lot of your posts at the beginning, and I believe at that point I reached out, and my typical reach out for me is when I see somebody that's very interesting on LinkedIn, I reach out to them, I look at their business, and unless it's directly tied to something I'm doing where it's really easy to connect, I ask them what's their aha moment. And I would say about 50% actually answer, and it's really interesting. Most people just connect with me. I would say about 99% connect, but they don't ever answer me. That was it. So I find LinkedIn is sort of a hit or miss. So, I mean, I'm able to connect really quickly with people, but I find also that the engagement doesn't always add up to the amount of connections you can quickly do.
Mm-hmm.
So if you could, what typically do you do as I say, okay, I'm going to start off, I'm going to go reach out, let's say customer XYZ or person XYZ. What's your typical way of going about it? Do you have a preset letter of like, okay, I'm going to ask these questions, or I'm going to go off and just wing it as I go? What's your...
Yeah, I don't have anything set, and I should, you know, I just said should, and I don't like the word should because I don't really feel that there is such thing as should in business. But anyways, I could have something preset, and maybe I will try that in the near future when I have a more structured sales approach. But for up until this point, what I've done is I really focus on myself in the content that I share, in part because I want to set the tone for how people will engage with me. I want them to know like exactly who they're getting involved with. I want them to get a really clear sense of who I am and what I believe in. So I like to share a lot of that stuff on LinkedIn. People who engage with me on that, I'll start one-on-one conversations with. Always, I never go to them with a pre-prepared, excuse me, like I don't have like a pitch or a specific message that I'm sending out to everybody. I'm very much wanting to engage people one-on-one, trying to keep it really simple and seeing, you know, it was great to see your name pop up. Love that resonated. Would love to know what about it resonated. How are your culture building efforts going? Those are the sorts of questions that I'm asking to see if I can get a conversation going. Because people have seen so much from me on LinkedIn, it positions me as a leader in this space. And I actually feel like there's a lot of opening. There's a lot of willingness to engage in these conversations. I go into those without expectations. I want to see, I'm a strong believer that I can't do what I do by forcing it. I can't do culture or leadership work with people who aren't ready. So I go in very open-minded and very exploratory, very curious. Who are you? What are you facing? And then it opens doors.
So you really go about it organically per person. So you're really sort of target focusing on a response from somebody or somebody that pings you or somebody that you notice, and then you engage them. That's really interesting.
Yeah. This is for the time being, the approach that I'm using, but I know that in the very near future, I'm going to reach a moment where I'm going to have something more established. Like I haven't done any outreach to people that I don't know. And I know that I need to start doing that, like I need to be building up a funnel with people that are outside of my immediate network. So there's a lot for me to learn. I really do not feel that I'm in a position right now where I have it all figured out. Like I said, like it's constant learning journey. And I'm going with what's working with my eye always on the future of what needs to change. What more can I do? How can I shift my approach in this or this way? Like I'm constantly contemplating that.
That's a really good point. So do you have like a master plan in your head? Obviously, I don't, chart on the wall, like a master layer, but in terms of getting your 1,000 true fans, and I think it's something I came across the article and I think I added it to my PDF. I'm amazed. It's a really simple concept and most people don't even think about it. They never think about they just want sheer numbers as opposed to having that sort of core group of fans. So when you're looking at it today, how do I figure out who are going to be my true fans versus just the followers or people that are just maybe interested in my business or maybe use my business, but versus my fans that really resonate with and I really connect with, and they will amplify my voice over their networks. And do you have a master plan based around that? Or are you starting to think about that?
Yeah. So I think initially the question that you had written out around 1,000 true fans was, how do you get to your first 1,000?
And, yeah, it was, but now that I see from our conversation, so it's going a bit differently. So that's
because the thing is, I want to answer how I believe you get to the first 1,000 before I answer the second one of the master plan for engaging them even more deeply. But I can't stress enough the importance of being exceptionally honest about who you are. Be honest about what you know, as in really own your strengths and your knowledge and your insights and your mindset. Like own that, be honest about it, but also be exceptionally honest about what you don't know. Be honest about what you're learning. Be honest about where you're stumbling. There's so much fear around being transparent about that because we worry in the business world that if we show a little crack in our facade that we're going to be perceived as failures and no one's ever going to want to hire us as consultants or pay for our services or buy our products or what have you. But people want honesty. They don't want perfection. And so when I started being really honest about who I was and what I believed, when I started using the word hippie more officially, when I started talking about heart and love, and when I started talking about, in 2018, I went through a big separation, a personal separation. I was married and it was life altering for me. And when I started being really honest about that, that's when the people that were engaging me became even more deeply engaged. When I started being really honest about what I was learning and about the crisis and the bumps and all this stuff. So regarding like how you build a base of really loyal people, regardless of what you're selling, be honest about who you are and what you're going through. People are going to give you their hard-earned money because they believe in you as an individual. It's not about product or features. If you're trying to differentiate yourself based on product and features, it's a very short-term, very nearsighted game, because you're constantly going to be chasing after where product features are in the market or in the industry,
Yeah.
So be honest about you, be real. So I would say that when I started doing that, I started establishing a base. And then how you deepen that engagement, how I have deepened that engagement, is very much in this one-on-one approach where I see the same names popping up. There's a lot of thank you. There's a lot of support from my part to them. I'm I'm deeply humbled by the fact that people care enough to share stuff and to engage in what I do. And I want them to know how grateful I feel. I'm not shy about hitting the love button and spreading my love and support for the people who encourage me. That has allowed me to get some like really engaged people in my side of the court, and I feel them and I hear them and I can, they're resharing my stuff and they're checking in, and there are some regular names that I see over and over. The next phase of that is, for me, there were a few key moments in the last 4 years or so where I was working on some big projects and I needed support. And I flat out asked people that I knew one-on-one for the sort of support that I needed. Put me in front of people who would need this, or help me to promote this, or sponsor this thing. And that deepened our relationship even more, I would say. From a more tactical standpoint, get people on email lists, like
Yeah, the old newsletter. Yes.
yeah, regularly communicate with people, give them opportunities to actually sign up for information, because people want it. People want to follow along. Don't assume that people don't want to follow along, and give them opportunities to support you with their money and to
Yeah, that's key, right? That's key. And that's really interesting because I sort of see where you're going with this. So when you look at your fans and you look at, and we call them fans, but the people that are really sort of supporting you, do you feel that there are people that have been and continue to be close contacts, people you were engaged with beforehand that sort of followed your story and sort of became attached to your story? And now if you were to take that and say, well, how do I amplify that to multiple people that are not necessarily within my current connections? How do I go and get somebody? So example, for myself, it's not as easy just to go off and tell a story because people are going to react to me differently. So people connect with me in a different way than they will necessarily connect with you.
Mm-hmm.
So if I were to look at you and say, well, what's your game plan? How would you amplify your voice if you weren't connected to those people in the same way? Like if you had to start off and say, I'm going to go down to LA and start doing this, where my connections are not necessarily the same. What would be the key things you would be looking for or to do to get that?
Mm-hmm. Oh, man, I mean, it's a whole other world now that we're in COVID land and we can't physically be in front of people,
Yeah.
because for me, I have to work with the skill set that I have. So I really like talking to my camera, and I'm a good writer. So content, content, and not just content that's about me, but tying my content back into what I know, tying my content back into my theories and my approach and my mindset that make me the consultant that I am. I think it's really important that I continuously position myself as an expert and really claim that space, really own that space with confidence. This is what I know and this is what I can do for you. And the way that, my game plan for moving past my initial fans is investing more in content. So I'm doing more LinkedIn lives. Like LinkedIn, man, LinkedIn is so great. I'm really, really, really big fan of LinkedIn, but
Yeah, I
LinkedIn
can tell.
lives.
And we're not sponsored by LinkedIn, just
I would very happily be, though. Yeah, like LinkedIn lives give people an opportunity to see who you are. I think that's going to be a really big, the more LinkedIn lives that I do, the more that I think that that's going to be a really great way for me to open up my visibility. The other thing is that I'm moving into a series of interviews that I'm going to be doing around the themes that are important for me professionally. I want to amplify other people's voices and amplify other people's projects and support them in growing their own platforms through my own. And it's similar to what you're doing right now with this podcast, but it increases visibility for them and for you. And ultimately, when you're amplifying other people's message, you're increasing the number of eyeballs on your work. So I'm a very big believer in collaboration and cooperation and competition to increase visibility. So my lives, my interviews, and the other thing that I did recently that I'm really excited about is I built an executive culture building program. It's a leadership development program, but it's focused on culture building. It's called Change Leader. And I built the program out based on my methodology of how you build culture. And I was really, really excited about this program. It's a service offering. But there's so much potential to turn that service offering into content that people can engage with, even if they're not ready to get into the full program. So what I did once I built the program out was I thought, people need to know about this. What do I need to build so that people can actually hear about it, get in front of it, understand the theory and the mindset behind it, understand me? And so I started writing about the program. And once I started writing about it, it kind of like blossomed into this big writing project, which is like a mini book, I guess,
That's actually really popular. I know a lot of people are creating their own ebooks around their subject of expertise.
Yeah, I think it's super important. It's important for us as business owners to hone our language and our message. So it's an important practice from a marketing standpoint, from a visibility standpoint, to create content. But I think it's also really important to practice talking about and writing about what you're doing, and what you can offer. It helps you to grow your confidence.
Yeah, it's a great point. I know a lot of people are actually going off and they're doing TikTok. So they're creating this second platform that actually amplifies their LinkedIn. And I find that really interesting. At first, TikTok for me is just fun videos. I could spend too much time on it, wasting, waiting room and so on. But I started to notice a lot of people, content creators, were using TikTok for these 60-second segments, bursts of their knowledge.
Yeah.
And then it translates really well to LinkedIn. And LinkedIn Live then grows from there. And I've noticed that. Is that something you guys are going to start looking at when saying, and generally speaking, for your business? Are you going to say, okay, you know what? I'm going to start looking at multiple platforms as opposed to just sticking to LinkedIn, but creating smaller content. I find personally, a lot of people don't want a book thrown at them at the beginning. They almost want to take very small bites of information. And then if they like it, then they want more, and constantly. It's the same thing for podcasts. You listen to one, you like it, then you start going through the back catalog.
I'm not ready for TikTok just yet, although I do think it's a fantastic platform for those bite-sized piece of information. My personal Instagram is, there's some real momentum there, and there's a lot of support, and I'm starting to shift my personal Instagram to much more of a professional space. There's such a small divide between who I am personally and who I am professionally. So it's not a big jump for me to start posting a lot more of my work on my Instagram, but I'm actually, for the time being, wanting to focus my energy on what's already working. So LinkedIn works. Videos on LinkedIn for me work. The lives work. The interviews with other people are working. On Instagram, what works for me is the lives as well, to be honest. So I did a series on Instagram, which is called Unbaked. And it was an 8-part series where we kind of unpacked our gooey stories of becoming. So these key moments in our life, which made us who we are today, it ended up becoming a very emotional, very rich, super in-depth storytelling experience. And I had several, dozen people write me and say, like, this is meaningful for me. The nice thing about that for me is that it's not directly tied to my work, but to a certain extent, like the thread is there. And what I like about my connection right now between Instagram and LinkedIn is that I want each platform to give people a different depth of connection with me, a different understanding and opportunity, a different understanding of me and a different opportunity to engage with me. I want people to recognize that nuanced and multifaceted, and they're not going to get the same thing everywhere. So yeah, for the time being, I want to be focusing my energy on what's working. I want to be
Yeah.
focusing my energy on the platforms that work for me, and also the relationships that are working.
Yeah. Yeah. 100% I agree. And it's, if you're using live on Instagram, it's the same thing as TikTok. So the platforms are very similar, and it's very interesting. So for myself, I keep my Instagram private. It's like it's mine. And I use Twitter and I use LinkedIn as my professional side. And Twitter is more of my side gig, and LinkedIn is more my day job. And I've sort of created this, and I often wonder how to meld the two together again. And
Yeah.
even Instagram, I'm not, it's just like, again, it's personal, but I always wondered, am I missing out something, or should I amplify it? So for this podcast, I will be using Instagram, but creating a podcast page as opposed to an Oliver page, even though I'll show up. And what's your thought on that? Do you think it's worth it to go off and say, yes, I need to bring these together? Or do you feel like if they don't tie in as a business aspect, don't bring them together?
Well, my first thought is I would want people listening to this, and also you, to think about what you're doing on each of those platforms that actually brings joy and that actually returns something to you, and to really get objective about how you are using the platforms. This is really based on what I want to be doing with the platforms. Like, is this thing that I'm doing actually bringing me joy? Because it's so easy for us to get so lost in social media platforms. Like that, creating a strategy for how you intermingle different platforms, different social media approaches, is many people's full-time job. As in, you're not one person who would build a strategy for all those things, but you need like a team of people to help you to get strategic and intentional about doing social media. So I would say, if you have a spark of an idea or some curiosity or something that kind of excites you and brings you some pleasure around how you want to use one of those platforms, follow that rabbit hole. Go down that rabbit hole, create content that you actually want to be creating. If not, don't spend your energy building out a strategy that's exhausting you or making you feel stressed and unsure until the time comes when, you can bring on someone else to help you, and maybe you have a little bit more free time or more money or more of an interest in doing it. I think it's important that our social media approach remains something that actually feed us, so I guess from a strategic or tactical perspective for you regarding blending the pages together, what's my input there? I mean,
Yeah,
I
really
think
interesting.
my input is, I think the less divide there is between our personal and our professional persona, the better. That's my perspective anyways, because I think it's important for all of us to bring a lot more humanity to our work. And I also have experienced just the power of doing that. It opens up a lot of doors when you bring more of who you actually are to your professional spaces.
I see that. That's really interesting. And so if I were to look at it and say, what would you be your top 2 or 3 things somebody should do in their personal brand that they would amplify on their social media for their marketing? Like the things they should focus on. For example, one of my past speakers, they talked about the story, just really their personal story is where they start off their whole adventure on branding.
Yeah.
Where would you say, if somebody starts off, they don't have a huge budget, they're starting their business, or their business is already working, but they don't have thousands of dollars to spend on having somebody professionally come in, where should they start so that at least they're in the right direction?
Document very honestly where you're, as far as what you're sharing, just be honest. Own what you know, and be honest about what you're learning. Be honest about what you don't know. I've already said this at some point on this podcast specifically, but don't be shy about really being honest about what you know and what you don't know. Get curious publicly. Make it clear what you're out there to learn. Use your social media as a place to document that journey. That's what I would say about that. If you don't have the money, start where you are, is pretty much what I'm saying. Start where you are and be honest about where you are. Also, social media is about being social. So don't feel like starting out, everything needs to be about you. especially don't feel like starting off everything needs to be about your product, because your product is boring generally. What's exciting is not the product. What's exciting is your passion for the product. It's the reason you built it. It's your vision for the impact of the product. It's the community that you're forming around it. That's what I want to be hearing about. So make social media about being social. Use it as an opportunity to actually engage other people on what they're doing. If you don't have anything to say about where you're at, ask people about where they're at. Lean into your curiosity and the things that you want to learn, and use social media as a place to learn. There's a lot of different advice in all of that, but I think, don't make it about your product.
Excellent. So don't product spew. Just don't sit there and talk about your product. I agree. I think that's really well said. There's a lot that, and this is always difficult in such a short period of time to really give people, an in-depth idea of what to do. I think it just every time is a little bit tidbits helps. I think a little bit of information here in people's opinion is really important. And that's what I honestly believe people are going to take away from this. So I think it's really smart what you said there. I love it.
To reiterate it and to kind of really make this point clear, I have seen the impact on teams when leaders show up honestly as themselves. And when I say that, what I mean is like honest about how they're feeling, honest about beliefs, honest about values. What happens when you are more you at work is that you create an environment where people actually want to engage you. And then your culture becomes strong, and then your messaging becomes stronger, and then your creativity blossoms as a team. And then your company ends up being a lot more exciting, because as a founder, as a leader, you showed up as yourself. Honestly, it's as simple as that. If you want to be building a strong culture and strong messaging, you start with yourself, just being you. I've seen the power of that with the companies that I've worked with, and with more and more companies that I'm not working with. This is a trend we're seeing, a lot more humanity in leadership, a lot more empathetic leadership. When you translate that into your personal efforts, ultimately what we're learning here is bring more of yourself to everything that you're doing. Don't feel you need to carry a facade of success. Just point. Be you. Yeah. Be you, be you, be you, be you, be you. You are so compelling as you are.
Should get t-shirts made.
So. Yeah, well, I mean, the tagline for me that led me down the consulting path that I'm on right now, in 2013, I started saying, tap into your identity. Because the clients that I was working with at the time, still startups, I would say, who are you? Why are you doing this? Tell me about yourself. I need to know more. If you want me to help you to communicate, I need to know who you are. And they weren't able to tell me who they were. And so I started saying and helping them to tap into your identity, look inward, look inward, look inward. Like, what truth do you have to share? What part of your personality, your individuality, your story?
Great points. So, you know what? As we're wrapping this up, I have one more question before we go into the rapid questions. So cool. A little fun part. And that's, when should people start looking at hiring somebody like you or you and stuff? Like what point in the business cycle do you feel like somebody should be looking at this? Mm-hmm. Should it be something that they start very early or sort of like as they move along? Is there a sense of like, revenue? How do you say to somebody like, okay, it's time for you to go professional as opposed to trying to do everything yourself?
Mm-hmm. Obviously, budget is a constraint here. So I think realistically, the best time to bring on someone who's going to help with leadership or culture building, an external player like me, would be a small to medium-sized enterprise that is established. You're no longer in a startup phase, but you're still growing. And actually, you want to be investing in growth. So the team has grown very quickly, or you're contemplating a merger, or you're facing an opportunity in a market shift where you need to invest in your people, and you need to really invest in the creativity of your company. So I think that that's kind of like the perfect moment to bring on someone, because at that point, you are more established as an organization. You have a sense of your culture. You have a sense of your vision. You have a sense of your values. Your product is, or your service is viable, and your team needs support to get creative. So from a budgetary standpoint, I would say that's the perfect moment to bring in someone like me. I would also say, though, that investing in brand, investing in culture early on for startups is pivotal. It's fundamental that people understand what they're buying into, and that your team, as it slowly grows, gets what they're working on, not just the product, but like, what are they attaching their precious time and energy to? As a founder, you need to do the work really early on to really understand the difference between your why and your what, and to help your team to understand the difference between your why and your what.
Really well said. So is this something you typically will do, is we'll walk through somebody for free and say, okay, let me see if you were ready for me to work with you? Or is it something that you feel like a lot of your customers are coming up because they say, yeah, this is it. I need you to work with me. Is there a process?
There's a process, and it's like a more extensive culture building work would be, let's say we're looking at least 3 months, 6 months, maybe a year. Obviously not everybody's ready to dive into that. This is very personal work. They need to like me. There needs to be trust. So there's always, at the beginning of this, we need to be testing. We need to see, where is the opening here with the team? Where's the opening with leadership? My approach early on with teams to make sure that there is alignment is I'm doing culture building workshops, which support them in naming a culture vision and then helping them to see how they can actually start shifting their practices to head in that direction. So culture workshops are an easy way to kind of bite off culture work and get a sense of whether they're ready. And the other thing that I do is one-on-one leadership development, or one on a few, if I'm working with a team of leaders, leadership development. So I'll do programs with leaders only, and then we can expand from there. So my service offers were very much designed so that people can test me out and I can test them out, and we can build strategy as we go in a phase by phase approach so that they're not overwhelmed by the culture building work.
Excellent. That's great. So now, rapid round of questions. This is one of my favorite parts of all this. It's amazing. It leads up to it. I love everything. And here's the first question I'm going to ask you. And I send you guys random questions all the time, so I pick them randomly. But cool. I had 3 for you. One that I love is, how do you manage your stress?
I have to return to my body. Get out of my head and return to my body. So I manage my stress by dancing, by free moving, by breathing, by screaming, by running, by getting out of my head.
Nice. And I assume if you live in a condo, people are not going to be happy about the screaming and dancing on the floors.
No upstairs or downstairs neighbors for me.
Excellent. All right. So what is one device you cannot live without? If you had to suddenly stop everything else and drop everything, like for me, for example, it's my phone. If I don't have my phone, I feel kind of like awkward.
Mm-hmm. I love my phone, but my number one device is my journal and a pen, because I'm a very visual thinker and I'm a very systematic sort of thinker. I need to chart things out visually, and I need to get a sense of the bigger picture. And I think my devices where I'm typing out linearly and everything's very, logical, that actually doesn't bring out the best of me. So paper, pen.
A daily journal person.
Oh, yeah.
Every day I got a journal. It just keeps me focused.
Grounded, for sure.
Yeah, somewhat. I'm not that good at it. All right, my last question. What is the one book that really changed your business outlook? Like a business book that you felt after you read it or you skimmed through it, you said, this is really something that I could relate to.
Mm-hmm. Every time I get this question, I'm like, oh, I'm going to disappoint them, because the thing is, like, I'm not a big business book reader. I tend to listen to podcasts, and I also tend to draw parallels between fiction and business. So the book that I would recommend is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's like,
yeah, I have heard of it. Yeah, it's cool.
So it's about pursuing your visions and pursuing your dreams, but more tangibly than that, it's about being really concrete about what you want and naming your wants. And I think it's really, really important from a business standpoint to be very clear on what you want and to not be afraid to make those declarations, to not be afraid to set ambitious goals that are far beyond where you are right now. And honestly, The Alchemist is like kind of my Bible in that sense.
Very interesting.
It supports me in believing that there are greater powers at play here.
Very cool. Very cool. Great answer. Thank you.
I want to add one more to my first rapid fire about how I manage stress. It's going to be a quick one, but
Sure. Go ahead.
My gut reaction is like move out of the head, move into the body. But the other thing that I would say, which I think is really fundamental, is I talk it out. I manage my stress by focusing on the connections in my community that have my back. So friends, family, partner, and also professional. I am very lucky. I have some professional connections that there's no judgment there. And it's always a massive stress reliever to talk to people who've been through what you're going through. So to whoever's listening, find people who are non-judgmental and release your stress to them. Don't know that you are not alone in whatever you're facing. And if you can't find someone like that, then please find me on LinkedIn, because I'm very happy to talk about this stuff.
What a great segue into, I was going to say, I encourage everybody to go and click on the links that are going to be on the show notes and to reach out to you on LinkedIn and connect up. And listen, it was a wonderful conversation. I want to thank you very much for your time
Thank you so
and all
much,
your
Oliver.
answers. It was great talking to you.
Yeah, I mean, I could have gone on forever. Like it's exciting to look. It's very grounding to look backwards and realize how much you've learned.
I think it's a great opportunity for everybody to get to listen to somebody and hear stories. And I think that's what I love doing about this. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you again.
That's my absolute pleasure.